Okay. Can we all hear me again?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Okay. So let's just recap a little bit, and then I'll do a numerical example. Right. So we're looking at a binomial model. And so the thing that a binomial model, what is given to you in a problem formulation are data that will allow you to create these pictures here. So it will allow you to create the picture of the stock, so you will know that in a binomial model, the future stock price has two possible values. Two. That's why it's called a binomial model. Whereas the risk-free security, in this case, we're going to call the bank, that only has one possible future value. Okay, so the bank carries an interest rate, in this case, 25%. The stock has two possibilities. It can either go up or it can go down. And in this case, it can go up by 100%, or it can go down by 50%. So these are the U and D factors and the interest rate, right? So this is what's given to you. And now what we're going to be doing is derivative pricing. So a derivative is, for this class, it's a function. Give me any function you want, that's going to lead to a derivative security. How? Well, you give me the function, however function you want. Give me a function, and the derivative that comes with that function is going to give a payoff, right? So that's going to be random. This thing here has two values, so it's going to be, so there are two possible values. This has two values. Right, it's going to be f of S0 times U and f of S0 times D. So this, because the stock can take two values, this derivative can also take at most two values. And these are the two values. So now the question is, in derivative pricing is, given such a function, so you have the stock dynamics, you have the bank dynamics, so U, D, and R, and you have a function. Now the question is, what is the price at time 0 for that derivative? What's the price at time 0 for this derivative? This is what derivative pricing is about. How much are we willing to pay at time 0 for this payoff? So that's the question. What are we willing to pay at time 0 for the payoff f of S1 at time 1? This is what derivative pricing is about. We know what we're willing to pay for the stock. That's also to be considered as a derivative, right? The stock can take the values 2 and 8. What are we willing to pay for it? Well, we're willing to pay $4. The bank can also be considered as a derivative. What are we willing to pay for $1.25 at time 1? What are we willing to pay for that at time 0? What are we willing to pay? $1. In general, what would we be willing to pay for an arbitrary function? Of course, it's going to depend upon what function it is, but given the function, what are we willing to pay? Okay, so this is the key concept of quantitative finance. This is what's called replication. This is replication. Replication. And as before, important names, an important concept typically has a bunch of names. This here can also be called hedging. Replication, hedging. Okay, so what is that? So if you take a step back and maybe think about something completely different, right? So I have two kids, and one thing that you do in the summer, well, at least you used to do in the summer before this COVID crisis, one thing that you do is they make a smoothie stand, right? And so they sell smoothies to the neighbors and whoever passes by on the street, and you have to price a smoothie, right? So, and the kids have to do this. And so how do you price a smoothie? Right? You figure out what the ingredients that you want to use, and you know what the various ingredients that go into a smoothie, you know what they cost, and then you're going to add some profit on top of it, or call it labor, right? And you add these things up, the various components, you add them up, and whatever number you're going to get, well, that's going to be the price of the smoothie. So derivative pricing is nothing else than pricing a smoothie. So what we're going to be doing is to price this derivative, to price this option. What we're going to be doing is we're going to take some of the stock, which we know how to price. We're going to take some of the stock, which we know how to price, and we're going to take some of the bank, which we also know how to price, and we're going to mix these two things together to create the smoothie, to create the derivative. And then because we know what the price of these two ingredients, the stock and the money market account, because we know what these prices are, we can just, and we know what quantities are needed to create a derivative, well, then we know exactly how to price the derivative. Just like we know how to price a smoothie, given that we know how many strawberries and other berries to put in there and some labor, and we know the price of all these things, we know how many things are needed, and then we add them up, and we're going to get the price of the smoothie, we're going to add them up, we're going to get the price of the derivative. Okay, so let's do this in a very specific example so you can see how to do it. The key term is this replication. The word replication comes from taking these ingredients and creating the derivative, creating the smoothie. So let's look at a specific example. What I want to look at here is I want to look at a call with strike. So this k, this constant that's in there is called a strike, being 5. This here is called the strike. Call with 5 in the strike, right? And then the model we're going to be using, is this one here. Okay. So how would a call look like? Well, it's going to have two possible values. You're going to have two possible values, right? So the function we're working with is f of x. This is it's a call. That means that the payoff function is x minus k positive pi. Okay. And x here, this is the future stock value. This is either 8 or 2. Okay, so let's make a diagram for the call. We're going to have two possible values. Okay. If the underlying is 8, so if x is equal to 8, then that's going to imply that it will be 8 minus 5 positive part. This is 8 minus 5 is 3. Positive part of 3 is 3. So the up value, the payoff of the call option in the up state is 3. If you go to the down state, so that means that the stock is dropping down to 2. So it's going to go down to 2. So now I'm going to look at the payoff. The payoff is going to be 2 minus 5 positive part. This is equal to minus 3 positive part. That's 0. So we know now what the derivative payoff is. It's 3 and 0. And the big question is, this is what happens at time 1. So this is given. Your job is to figure out what should we put here. Right. That's what it means to price a derivative. It is to figure out what number should we put here. I know I'm going to get 8 and 2, but what number and how many dollars should I put? Right, this is $3, right? 8 is the stock, 3 is the call, the stock is 2, derivative is 0. What are we willing to pay today?
5.
Go ahead. 5?
5.
Okay. You want to put 5?
Yes, I want to put 5 there. Since the function is x minus k, and the x is x sometimes is 8 or 2, and k is 5. So I think it 5 is okay.
Okay. So let's go with this one. This is okay. So say the question mark is 5. This is the student suggestion. Say it's $5. So the question is so imagine that you're doing this problem at the exam or doing this problem at the homework. Just think about, could this be 5? Are you willing to pay $5? Are you willing to pay $5 to get either 3 or 0?
Oh no. Okay. I want to pay 2.
You want to pay 2? Okay. So you're not willing to pay 5 because if I look at
because its on price is either 3 or 0. If I pay 5, I will lose money.
That's right. You could put your $5 into this one here, and then you would get, I don't know if I can do this in my head, you would get 6 something out of it. For sure, right? Because no matter what happens, if you put $5 into the bank, you're going to get 5 times 1.25. So it cannot be 5. It cannot be 5. So it should probably be a number somewhere between 0 and 3. So this is no, because 5 in the bank gives 5 times 1.25 at time 1, and this 5 times 1.25, this is bigger than 3, and it's bigger than 0. So this is no good. This is no good, but something in between 0 and 2, and so you're suggesting 2. Okay, but it could also be 1.5, it could also be 1, it could also be a quarter. What is it? So this is what we're going to be trying to figure out now. And the way we're going to figure it out, is this idea of replication and hedging. Okay. So the idea of replication and hedging, and this here is nothing else than linear algebra. For those of you that are, all of you have seen linear algebra in some form or shape before. So this here is how we're going to take the smoothie and break it into its component and figure out what the price of each component is, how many of each components we need, multiply them together, add them up, and get the price. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy and sell. We're going to buy and sell quantities of the underlying securities. So we're going to buy and sell, we're going to buy delta naught of S naught. Remember in the model, we have, the two, we have the bank. So this here is S, this one here is S naught. So we have the stock and the bank. So we're going to buy and sell stocks and bank account units. We're going to buy this many of the bank. We're going to buy delta of S. So we're going to buy and sell to get the payoff. And so the payoff was F of S1, which was, it was a call, so it's S1 minus the 5 to get the payoff at time 1. Okay, so we'll write out what does it mean? Well, if I have that many units, of the bank, then at the end, so this is my portfolio. This here's my portfolio. So the portfolio payoff is going to be, well, this is how many I have of the bank, and what's the value of the bank at the end? Well, it's 1.25. That was 1.25 plus I have delta of S. Okay, so the price of S is what? The price of S is either, they're going to be 8 and 2. 8 and 2. Okay, so let me just write this here as S1, right? And what I want this thing to be, is exactly S1 minus 5. So the portfolio payoff, this quantity, is what we have here. This here is the claim. This is the derivative payoff. This is this one. And this here is what it means to replicate. This here is replication. And the mantra is, we all know what a mantra is. A mantra is like rule of thumb, or like a guideline, or something to keep in mind. The mantra is pricing equals replication. So this should be a big hint. Remember what our main application was. Right. Just find the right slide. Right here. Our main application is derivative pricing. Okay. So if the mantra is that pricing is replication, then it's our main application is replication. I guarantee you, in this entire course, in the next course, and in other courses about derivative pricing, whenever you're asked to price something, you're going to have to replicate. So in this course, for now, what that means is looking at these equations here, right? We have two equations here, right? These are two equations. This here is the same thing. This set of equations, I can write them up because S1 can take two values. And so this here is going to be the same thing as saying delta 0 times 1.25 plus delta, and then S1 could take two values, 8 and 2. So here I can put 8. this is the same thing as, and then over here, I would put 8 minus 5 plus the part, which is 3. And this is the same, and then in the downstate, I'll have 1.25 plus delta, but instead of 8 in the downstate, I'll get 2. So it's delta times 2 is equal to 8, it's equal to 2 minus 5 plus the part, and this is 0.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
So why we are equating portfolio payoff with derivative payoff?
That's the idea in replication.
So are we trying to like equate it to 0? Like the net should be 0?
Well, that would be the same, right? Because I could move,
Yeah.
I could move this one to the other side and say that there should be no difference between the derivative and the portfolio. Yeah.
What I'm trying to understand is like what's the logic of equating these two sides? Like
Yes.
why we are doing it, just equating portfolio payoff with the derivative payoff? Why
Yes.
these should be equal?
Why should they be equal? Yeah, excellent question. And so the way that mathematicians go about this is asking, what happens if not? Okay, so if you can just bear with me and let me get down to the bottom of the calculation, then we'll play this game. Like, what would happen if this was not the case?
Yeah.
Okay, because if I can come up with something there, if something bad happens, if it's not the case, bad in quotation, of course, if something bad happens, if this is not the case, then I would have given an argument for why it has to be the case. Let me solve the two equations first, because then we'll have a specific number in mind and we have something specific that we can reference. So this is an excellent question. Excellent. This is, why would we ever do this? Okay, so here we have two equations and two unknowns. We have delta naught and delta, right? So these are two equations in two unknowns. And the unknowns being delta 0 and delta. And this is what I mean when it says it becomes linear algebra. This is where these equations, this is how we break the smoothie into its components. Figuring out how much of that component, how much of the stock component should go in there, and how much of the bank should go in there to create the smoothie, to create the derivative. Okay, so I'm trusting that we can all solve two equations and two unknowns. This is not something that I'm going to be spending time trying to do. I am trusting that you guys know how to do that. If you don't know how to solve two equations and two unknowns, this is something that you need to figure out how to do quickly, because you're going to be doing this a lot in this class. If you go ahead and you solve, you're going to get delta to be a half, and you're going to get that delta naught is minus 4 over 5. So we have two equations and two unknowns, and so you should know that such a system of equations, they are linear, right? You can have 0 solutions, you can have 1 solution, or you can have, what's the third possibility? Two equations and two unknowns can have 0, 1, or somebody is writing it in the chat. I wish I was big enough to start. There we go. Infinitely many, absolutely. Oh yeah, there are lots of questions here, so I need to go better. There's a question in here, would it not depend upon the probability of going up and down? Yeah, maybe it will be the expectation. Yeah. You will have So one thing to note here about all of this is that I haven't said anything about the probability of these things happening. All the way from the very beginning, either I forgot or I deliberately did not do anything about the probability of this random variable taking these two values. I said nothing about it. It was not mentioned. In the example that we're doing here, we have these two possibilities. I have not said anything about the probability of going up versus the probability of going down. The only thing I've said is that there's a possibility of going up and there's a possibility of going down. But I have not said if it's 50-50, if it's 40-60, if it's 30-70, whatever it is. I haven't said anything about it. So either it's because I forgot to do it and then we're going to need it at some point, or it's because it doesn't matter. And it's the latter. It doesn't matter. So you'll see that coming up here in just a little tiny bit. The probability of going up or going down, it does not matter. The only thing you need to know is that there is a possibility of going up or going down, but what the specific probability is irrelevant. And this can be a difficult thing to accept, but you'll see it here in the argument. We're almost to the end, and then we have to justify why is it that this makes sense. Okay, so we got down to how to break the smoothie into its components, how to break the derivative into its two components. And so now we know it. I know how many stocks to buy. I know how many bank account units to buy in order to create this payoff. Okay, so what is the price of that portfolio? So the price at time 0 for the portfolio, and this here is the replicating portfolio. The replicating portfolio, this is delta half, delta 0 minus 1, 4 over 5. Well, what is that? This is what? Well, I need to buy half a stock. So I need a half times the stock price. What's the stock price? The stock price was 4. Okay, so I need a half times 4. And then the bank account, this was minus 4 over 5 times the value of the bank account times 0, that's 1. Right, so what I have here, this is my is not. What I have here, this is my bank account at time 0. What I have in front, this is my delta. And what I have here, this is my investment. I'll work out what this is. This is 1.25. So this is the value of the lubricant portfolio. If I put in $1.20, I can buy half a stock, and I can buy minus what will be 0.8 bank account units. Right? So we can trade fractions here. And this will give me that specific number, 1.2. This is what I am claiming. This is what I'm claiming we should write here. This question mark here, this is 1.2. And then, as one of you pointed out, like, why on earth should it be 1.2? And so my argument there is going to be, what would happen if it's not 1.2? We already had some of it, right? We already talked a little bit about, like, what would happen if it was 5?
You will have a chance to make a profit.
Yes, that's right. So say, so that's exactly it. So this is, that's the key. That's the key down here. So why should the times 0 price of the call be 1.2? Well, pick a number. Pick a number that is not 1.2. So what if the price, the call price, was 2? Well, then what would happen? What would you do? If you were an investor, you know that the price of the replicating portfolio is 1.2 and the price of the call is 2. Say you're sitting on a desk and you observe this. What would happen if the price of the smoothie ingredients, when you add them up, differ from the smoothie that you can go to your neighbor and buy?
So there would be arbitrage opportunity.
Yes, that's right. Well, then there will be arbitrage. And okay, so what's an arbitrage? How would you do this? So what would be our strategy? So strategy. What to do? Should we, the price of the replicating portfolio is 1.2, the price of the call is 2. Should we buy or sell the call? Should we buy or sell the replicating portfolio?
Buy the portfolio and sell it.
Buy the portfolio. And you're going to sell the call. You're going to buy the portfolio. This is going to cost you money, right? This is going to cost you, so we're going to have time 0, we're going to have time 1. You're going to buy the portfolio. This is going to cost you 1.2. So I'm going to put a negative sign there. And then at the end, you're going to get stuff from the portfolio because you have it. And what you're going to get at the end is going to be this, what was it, 0, and at the end, you're buying this tree. You're paying 1.2, and you're buying this tree. So you're going to get 3 and 0. So you're going to get at time 1, you're going to get 3, you're going to get 0, depending on the contract. You're going to sell the call. You're going to sell the call. So that means you're going to get money today. You're going to get 2, because this was what we were pretending, right? We're pretending there is a difference between the two. So we are assuming that the price of the call was 2. Okay, so if that's 2, and we're selling it, we get 2 here, but then of course in the future we have to pay. Now what do we have to pay for the call in the future? Well, there are going to be 2 possibilities. We sold the call, so presumably we're on the hook in the future. So we're either going to pay -3 or, well, 0. And that's a transaction we're making. And so the net effect is what? Well, the net effect today is 0.8. So we're going to get 80 cents. And what happens in the future? Well, in the future, the two things cancel out. And that's the feature of the replicating portfolio. These 2 legs, these 2 sets of legs, they exactly cancel each other. They exactly cancel each other because of the replicating equation. So let me find them. The reason that these 2 legs, they cancel each other, the reason these 2 legs cancel each other is because of this equality sign here. The reason that these two sets of legs out here are exactly the same is because of this equality sign here. So what this is showing you is that you can get 80 cents for free, because in the future, there's going to be no obligation. So you do this transaction, and you earn 80 cents. Okay, you can do it once, you can do it twice. You can do it twice, you can do it again and again and again and again and again. And so this is arbitrage. You get 80 cents with no risk. So this shows you that if the call price was 2 and the replicating portfolio, well, we know the replicating portfolio is 1.8. If that's the case, you can pocket 80 cents today. And of course, you can go through the same argument. Instead of 2 here, you could put 3. If you put 3, then you would pocket even more. And of course, if you go down to the other side, if you're less than 1.2, so say that this is 1, well, if it's 1, then you should probably think about switching your strategy. Instead of buying the portfolio and selling the call, you want to switch it so that you start selling the portfolio and you're buying the call. Some of you might find it uneasy to have no restrictions on your holdings of the stock and the bank account. For example, here you see that you're going negative in the bank. That means you're borrowing money. But we're also allowing here a negative fractions in the stock. Indeed, so it could be negative. What that means is, even though it doesn't happen here, but the holdings in the stock here are positive, we do allow for negative holdings. And what that means is that you can hold a negative number of shares. And this is allowed in this model. You're allowed to sell the stock short. We do not have these restrictions on the fractions. And of course, whatever application you're ultimately interested in, this may be okay, and it may very well not be okay. But here in this model, we do not have these restrictions that you can't go negative. So about 10, 15 minutes ago, there was one of you who asked, let me do another poll here, because maybe this is the way to do it. So one of you asked if this would make sense. So let me try to do a poll and see. And also that student, I lost track of who asked it.
Yeah, Professor got it.
Got it. Yep. This is an argument. This is an argument that we'll see a lot. Replication. This is really, really important. So I can see that there are students that want to see this a little bit more, and a little bit more detail. So that we have 15 minutes left.
Hello, Professor. Could you, the next time, could you please send us the Zoom meeting password? Since when I use my computer and the web Zoom, it's not very good. Sometimes I can't hear or see. It's not convenient. But when I use iPad Zoom software, it is quite good.
Okay. Yeah. So I can do that. I believe it should be the same meeting, the same password, and I can send them out to everybody.
Yes, and if I use the Zoom ID and the password and use the and use the iPad to attend the class. I will not need VPN.
Yeah, this I don't know. This I don't know. I don't know.
But it will be very convenient if you send us the Zoom meeting password.
Yeah, I can do that. This I can do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so I can see that there are 11 students that that are more on the positive side, and then there are a few students that are not super happy about it. So here is what I propose that we do. Let's see if we can find an old exam problem. So this here is on your midterm. So you should all see the results here. So if you go to, it's hard to see. Let me bring it up on the computer screen instead. If you go to these midterm problems, let's see if I can find the midterm problems. Okay, so if you look at the first problem in the midterm set, it says consider a one-period binomial model. It has U to be 1.35 and D to be 0.85. It has an interest rate of 15% and has a stock price of 100. Okay, so let's skip question number 1 and let's just take a look at question 2 and 3. How do we do stuff like that based upon what we just did? So let me try to set it up for you. I'm going to switch back to the document camera so I can write. But if you haven't already pulled that screen, pull that file from the Canvas side and pull it now, and then you can tag along. So if I switch over to document camera. So this here is part of problem 1. So what we're looking at is a model that has an initial stock price of 100. Right, so the stock price at time 1 is going to be 100 times this psi, and psi can take two values. Psi can take two values. It can either go up 1.35 or it can go down 0.85. Right, so before it was 2.5 and now it's a little bit different. Again, there are no probabilities given. There's an interest rate. So the money market account, we typically start the money market account out at 1, just for simplicity. And then the interest rate is given to be 15%. So the bank account at time 1 is 1 times 1.15. Okay, so what we want to do is we'd be interested in a European call. So we haven't talked about the word European or American. There's no need to talk about that because we're living in a one-period model. So all these objects, they're the same. So I'm just going to be talking about a call option. So a call option would strike 95. Right, so this means that at the end, so at time 1, the payoff, the derivative, pays normally to be, it'll be S1 minus 95 positive 5. Okay, that's the deal. So now we're going to set up the replicating equations. So the replicating equations so that is we're going to do delta shares of stock. We have delta 0 shares. So this is the S shares of the money market. And what we want to do is we want to hit this option payoff. Okay, so on one hand we're going to have the portfolio, on the other hand, on the other side of the equation, we're going to have the derivative. And let me put them on the same. So S1. So what the equations are, first we can write it as delta 0 times S0 at time 1 plus, this is the value of my money market account, plus delta times S. That's delta is the number of shares times the stock at time 1. This I want to be equal to S1 minus 95 positive. And what I really have here is not one equation, but I have two equations. And the reason I have two equations is because S1 can take on two values. Okay, so what are the two values that it can take on? Well, this will be the same. We're at page 15, page 16. I'll write out what my two equations are. It will be delta naught times, and then this money market account price at time 1. This was 1.15 plus, and then it'll be delta. And then the stock price, well, what will the stock price be? It'll be 100. And then it can either go up or down. If it goes up by 35%. This is going to be the value of the portfolio, the replicating portfolio in the up state. I want this to be exactly the same as the value, the payoff of the call option in the up state. So here I'm going to have 100 times 1.35 minus the 95. This was the upstate situation, and then we do the downstates. For the money market account, it doesn't matter. I always get 15% interest. What matters is what happens to the stock price. Well, if we're in a down situation, then we're going to move down by 15%. So we're going to take 100 times 0.85. And I want that to match up with 100 times 0.85 minus 95. So that is exactly what we had before, except the numbers have changed a little bit. We have two equations and two unknowns. These equations, you can either have zero solutions, you can have one solution, or you can have infinitely many solutions. There is no possibility for this system of equations to have exactly 5 solutions. That's not possible. It's either 0, 1, or infinity. And for the reason for that is that when you're looking at two equations, two straight lines can either intersect once, they can be parallel, or they can be the same line. If they're parallel, there are no solutions. If they intersect, they can intersect exactly one time, and there's going to be one solution only. or they can be the same line and there'll be infinitely many solutions. In this case, you can go ahead and you can solve, and you can get a unique solution. So solve, get a unique solution. And then given the solution, so given that solution, the time 0 price, then what is it going to be? Well, it will be delta 0 times, well, it will be 1 because that was the initial money market account. The initial stock price was 100, so I'll have to add delta times 100 here. And that's going to be the initial price of the replicating portfolio, which we already argued must necessarily be the same as the call price. So I'm not particularly interested in whether or not you can solve two equations correctly in two unknowns. I would assume that we can all do that. But again, if you cannot do it, spend some time trying to figure this out. We'll use our office hours to try to get some help on how to do that. It is not particularly important for this class that you can solve these two equations quickly. If you're thinking about what we're going to be talking about in all exams, we will not be talking about how to solve two equations and two unknowns during the oral exam. I would be very happy if you can tell me how to get these replicating equations, and then you can use these replicating equations to say something about this price, and you can convince me that this is necessarily how it has to be, because otherwise there will be arbitrage involved. Arbitrage meaning that you can make money without bearing any risk. Are there any questions or comments? This, I think, would be a good time to. Let's check the log for questions. Yeah, so again, there are a few comments in the log about, in the chat about these expectations. So there are no expectations given here in this, in the solution. There are no probabilities given. So in a little bit, not today, but maybe next time, we will start talking about what's called risk neutral probabilities. And you'll see that word is, it sits in the problem formulation. So these probabilities are different. And to solve the problem, we do not need these probabilities. The probabilities that might be relevant are probabilities that we're going to create ourselves. This is not something that is given as input. Are there any questions or comments? We have a little bit of time left, so there are some loose ends here that I would like to tie up. I tell this to every class that I teach. I make this comment, and I'm going to make this comment here now, and I'll probably make it many times. So as a professor, as an instructor, we are here to try to help you guys master this material. But as a professor, there's no way that I can know what's inside. I mean, so if there's something that you do not understand, you need to somehow tell me, otherwise I can't help you. I know from past experience that there are some things that are more problematic than others. And so I will spend time doing these things because I know that in the past with other students that this has been a problem. But if there's something that is not clear to you, don't be afraid to ask, and then we try to address it. Okay, that's so. I cannot read your mind. You need to help me a little bit out here on what the confusing parts are. So there are some loose ends, and let's talk a little bit more about some of these loose ends. So if you go back to there's a light on it. Okay, there you go. There's a light on it. Okay, so that's awesome. The general model is given in terms of these U, D, and R. Okay, so no arbitrage. This is also just called no arb. So no arbitrage conditions. Right, so we have the stock. Right, so that's this guy. He goes up to U, and he goes down to S0 times D. He starts out at S0. And then over here, we'll have the bank, the money market account. So he starts out at S0, 0, which for practical purposes, we can always take to be 1. And then he goes up to 1 plus R. Right, so this here is at time 1, this here is at time 0. So what's the no arbitrage condition? Well, to get the no arbitrage condition, you merge these two pictures into one. You have two pictures, you merge them. Merge to get 3 possibilities. Merge to get 3 possibilities. So I'm going to make the 3 possibilities here. So the first possibility is, I will have S0 times U, I'll have S0 times D, and then I'll have this guy over here. So if I take S0, then S0 will go from S0 to S0 times 1 plus R. Okay, so the first possibility is that this sits up here. That's possibility 1. Possibility number 2 is I have my S0U, my S0D. The second possibility is that it sits in here. And the third and final possibility is that it dips below. Nice. Those are the 3 possibilities. That I merge these 2 pictures up here into one picture, and I can have these 3 cases. Which ones are the good ones? Which ones are the bad ones? Third one is a good one. Okay. Yeah. Bad in what context? Okay. So we're talking about no arbitrage. So let me be more specific. Should we use a model that has the first one? Is this a good model to use? Or is there a problem with the model? Second one, can we use this model, or is there a problem with this model? Then the third one. Should we, as model users, use this model, or is there a potential problem with this model? So that's what I mean by bad. Is there some sort of a defect with the model? So there's a problem in problem one. Yes. What's the problem in problem number one? What's the problem with the first one? Well, think back to our arbitrage discussion. If I am in the first world, if I am, I'm pointing with my mouse on it. It doesn't really work. If I am in the first one, let me do my finger here. If I am in the first one, what should I buy? What should I sell? Everything costs S0. We pick S0 to be 1. Okay, so the starting point is 1. What should I sell? What should I buy? Should I buy or sell the bank? Should I buy or sell the stock? I should buy the bank. Yeah, very nice. We should buy the bank. Okay, so here, we buy the bank, and then we sell the stock. Buy the bank, sell the stock. Okay, so why do we do that? Well, we buy the bank. This is going to cost us money today. Okay, it's going to cost us $0. And then in the future, because we bought units in the bank, we're going to get the dotted line as our payoff. Okay, so it costs us S0. We're going to get S0 times 1 plus R later. What about we're selling the stock? Okay, so when we're selling a stock, we're going to get money. How much money we're going to get? Well, we're going to get exactly the same amount that we had, that we needed to buy the bank. Okay, but then we're also going to have an obligation, right? Because we've got money today, so we're going to have an obligation in the future. And the obligation in the future is to either pay S0 times U or S0 times D. But because we are in the first scenario, we can cover these two. We can cover these two because we're always going to get more out of the bank. So what that means is that time 0, the 0 net, at time 1, there is a positive net. The positive net is going to be dependent on whether you have a heads or a tails on your coin flip, but you're always going to get more. So this is arbitrage. So now we move over to number 3, which is the last one over here. So now you can see that the stock is outperforming the bank always. The stock is always outperforming. So now we should buy the stock and we should sell the bank. And then we're going to get exactly the same effect. At time 0, the net effect is 0, but in the future, we're going to make money. So again, there's arb here. And then we are in the other scenario where the bank sits in between U and D. And so now you cannot just buy one and sell the other one, because there's going to be a scenario where one outperforms the other and vice versa. So here there is no arb. And so this is the good thing. So there's no arbitrage condition in our world. So for us, no arb is equivalent. This is equivalent to, what will it be? U is bigger than 1 plus R. U is bigger than 1 plus R. This is bigger than T. And please note, we have strict here. These are strict. These are strict. Why is that? Why is that? Well, again, the typical line of argument in a for a mathematician would be to say, well, what happens if it's not? What happens if it's equal? Right? So say one of them is equal. Say that D is exactly 1 plus R. Say that D is 1 plus R, then how does it look like? Well, then the merge of the two pictures would be, up here you would have is0u, and down here you have is0d, which is equal to is0 1 plus R. So here is also where the dotted line is. Well, then the stock outperforms the bank always, and sometimes strictly. Right. So if it turns out that the coin flip is tails, then the bank and the stock do the same. However, because there are two possibilities, that's the assumption that both things can happen. And there is a possibility then that the stock will outperform. The stock will never underperform, and there's a chance that it will outperform. That's still arbitrage. You don't take any risk, and there is a chance that you're going to make money. Well, that's an arbitrage. So these conditions here, this is what we'll always work under. In a binomial model, you need this relationship for the model to be arbitrage free. Some students, they always like to see the formal definition of what it means to be an arbitrage. Okay, so we see now two different cases. One case is that you make money today and you don't have any risk in the future. And the other one is that you don't make any money today, you just break even. And then in the future, there's a possibility of you making money. Okay, so what's the formal definition of no arbitrage? Well, okay, so wealth. So wealth, what is the wealth? So the wealth at time 0, the wealth at time 0, this is my x0. My x0 is equal to delta 0, this is the definition, is 0, 0 plus delta is 0, right? That's my wealth at time 0. At time 1, it's going to be x1 is going to be, well, what will it have? We'll have delta 0 is 1 plus delta is 1. So this is the initial value of the replicating portfolio, say, and this is the terminal value of the replicating portfolio, say. So an arbitrage, well, what does it mean? It means that there are two cases. So case 1, you start out with nothing. So we had that one. Start out, there's no action, but then in the future, x1, sometimes they become capital X's. So x1, the terminal wealth, the wealth at time 1, this is going to be always non-negative and strictly positive. So this is where I'll write the probability now. The probability that x is strictly positive is positive. So this is where the probability comes in. This p here, this is the thing that says that p of this random variable psi being u, this is a number strictly between 0 and 1. And of course, p of psi being d, this is 1 minus p of psi being u, which is of course then also going to be a number between 0 and 1. So we're not assigning specific values to being u and d, we're just assigning some probability to it. Okay, so the first time of arbitrage is that that was the one we just talked about, where we would have these scenarios that there's no effect at time 0, but then at the end, there is either a strictly positive effect, or in the case here, there is a strictly positive net with some probability. In this case, is the probability of psi being u. The other type of arbitrage that's out there, the other possibility is the one we had before, where you say that, well, you get money today. You get money today. And then in the future, you don't owe anything. And that was the one we had all the way back when we were talking about why should the call price be the value of the replicating performance. So you'll see this notation here quite a bit. X will be used to denote the wealth process. So the wealth process is going to be the number of shares times the various share prices. We're looking at a model that only has 2 input prices, the money market account and the stock. Of course, you could have more out here. There could be more stocks. There could be other things than stocks. So then you tag it on here. The indices, the way that it works is that what you have up top, this is used to indicate what number of assets you're looking at. And the bottom one, the 0 here, this is going to be used to indicate time. So I didn't put a 0 down here and a 0 down here. We're going to do that soon when we're going to move into a multi-period polynomial model. Okay, so that was a little bit of some loose ends regarding arbitrage. We have what, 10 minutes left. I think the last 10 minutes, I'm just gonna preempt a little bit about what's gonna be in one of your homeworks at some point. Now we have talked so much about the binomial model. We talked about, let me switch back so you can see me waving my hands. Right, so we talked a lot about the binomial model, the one period binomial model where there are 2 possibilities and there is 1 point where you can trade. Then, and it works, right? We solve these equations and we see the solution we can then use to use to create this replicating portfolio. But an actual question to ask, like, what is it that makes all this stuff work? Like, what kind of a change can I make such that it falls apart? Sometimes to better understand why stuff works, you change something and you make it fall apart. Then that will give some sort of an appreciation for why stuff is the way that it is. Okay, so let me spend the last 5 minutes or so just writing down a little variation of the model so you can see, okay, this is not going to work. and then what do we do, and so on. So let me make this the last bit that I'm talking about today. Right, so if you want to move beyond binomial models, so beyond binomial models, so why not just try a one period trinomial? Okay, so what changes is my psi. My psi, so now takes values in what u, mid, down, trinomial. The word tri comes from the fact that there are 3 possible values of the random variable psi. Looking at a picture, this is my is0. This is my up value as before. This is my down value as before. But now there is a third possibility. Now there is a third possibility, and that third possibility is is what's beyond binomial models. And as before, I'll have a bank account sitting somewhere in between these legs here. This is 0, 0. And this is 0, 0 times 1 plus r. Okay, so what's the big difference now? So what's the big difference now? Well, I still want to replicate, right? I still want to price a derivative. So then you take a function. So you're given a function like the ones we had before. F of x was what? X minus 5 plus the pop. One of these hockey sticks. You want to replicate. You want to price or replicate. You want to price or replicate. So what you want to do is you want to say, well, I can invest in the bank. So that's going to be this guy is 1, 0. Plus I can invest in the stock. So that's going to be this guy. And I want this to be exactly f of s1. So this is my replication. On the left-hand side, this here is the claim. And this here, this is the portfolio. So that's very similar to what we had before. What's the difference? What's the big difference between what we have now and what we had before? Yes, absolutely. There are 3 equations now. There are 3 equations. Very nice, very nice. So you have now, so now we have 3 equations in 2 unknowns. And how many solutions do 3 equations in 2 unknowns have? Well, it's the same story, right? But now it suddenly becomes much less likely that you can solve them. They often cannot be solved. Right? There are too many equations for the number of unknowns that we have. No, it's not likely to have infinitely many solutions. It is unlikely to have 0 solutions. So the empty set is the more unlikely one. It's not a question. So if I only had 1 equation in 2 unknowns, I would likely have infinitely many solutions. But here I have too many equations compared to the unknown. So there are too many equations for the number of unknowns there are. And that means that I can't solve them. I cannot replicate. Okay, so if I cannot replicate, then I can't price. Yeah, that's so the comments that are coming out in the log. Yep, solving two equations in two unknowns, just solving the first two equations out of this system, and then you miraculously have the hope that the third equation also holds. And you can see this is very unlikely. So here it comes to a screeching halt. How do you fix it? Well, how do you fix it? Well, you look at what's the problem. We have three equations and two unknowns. If you want this to work, you should have the same number of equations as you have unknowns. So you need to increase the number of unknowns. Okay, what determines how many unknowns you have? Well, the thing that determines how many unknowns you have is how many securities you have. And here you have two. Two securities will give you two unknowns. So if you want to have three unknowns, well, you need to have three securities. You need to have another stock, this stock, and this bank account. Then you get three equations and three unknowns, and then you can go ahead and solve it. This here is an example, and we'll talk a lot more about this, of what's called model incompleteness. Okay, so this word incompleteness, so the binomial model, binomial models be complete. Okay, so those are just two buzzwords that math finance folks like to use. Yeah, so the question is, why is the trinomial model not used? Well, the reason that a trinomial model is typically not used, well, sometimes it is, but for our purposes, the reason that we are not using a trinomial model is because we can't solve, in general, these equations. If we want to use a trinomial model, we have to bring up the number of securities. And by doing that, we will then be able to have more unknowns, and we will be able to presumably solve the equations and get a unique solution. Okay, this was for some of you, I know this is very late. It's a late evening for some of you. This is a long session. I kind of like, there's been a lot of interaction here. Questions in the chat, I really like it. I have to get better at reading this chat while I lecture, so I'm going to try to improve that. Some of you asked for passwords with the Zoom meetings. I'll try to get them to you. And then there's a question about next Tuesday not being a Tuesday. This is something I also need to figure out. So you will get an email about all of this stuff at some point when I figure it out, and then how to deal with it. If we are to miss a full lecture next Tuesday, that seems a little bit, it's a little bit much. Yeah, so let me try to look into this. And then otherwise, Thursday morning and also tomorrow morning, there are these, tomorrow morning is a problem session. On Thursday morning, there are office hours by me, and on Friday morning, there will be office hours by the TA. Are there any questions? Wait, there was a question in the chat. Yes, so this is matrix. This is linear algebra. This is what it means to price derivatives. It is, you have systems of equations that are linear and you have to solve them. If you want, the more securities you want to consider, the more time periods you want to consider, the bigger these matrices are going to be. In this lecture, I looked at the simplest possible case where it's a 2 by 2. And so we have more time points, we have more securities. It's going to become a larger and larger system of equations you have to solve. And conceptually, there's not much of a difference, but mechanically, when it comes to actually solving these equations, there's a big difference. Yep. The other questions? Okay. I'll get all this stuff posted, and then I hope to see you Thursday morning for office hours. Have a good night, guys, and have a good day. Take care.
Professor Larson.
Yes.
I'm your grader of the Math 45, so maybe it's the right time to talk with you. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, recently I'm working on the work authorization. So sorry for a late reply for email. And actually, I went through the syllabus of the Math 485, and I have currently I have no problem with it. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So what I would like, whatever number of hours you have, look through the exams, the homeworks, and when you see something is wrong, you write a comment in that student's homework place. And then if you see there are too many things wrong, then you ask them to hand those problems in again. How many, I will leave it up to you. Don't go overboard, but a group of say 10 students, I would expect maybe 2 students should have hand some parts in again. Of course, if it's all correct, it's all fine.
All right.
The idea here is to take some of the stress away from the students, and for those students that make these mistakes that are too serious, have them correct these mistakes. And the way to get their attention is by taking this credit away, and then you just fix the mistakes and you get the credit the next time.
Oh, okay. Oh.
In the past, this has worked really well for the students, and it's also worked really well for the grader, because as you see something that looks more or less correct, that's fine, just move on. If you see there's something that is not, that's simply just wrong, or something that is missing, then you have to hand that stuff in again.
Okay. So so the homework will be submitted by the PDF or doc.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not familiar with the tools to grade the homework. So yeah, maybe it takes time to get used to it.
It's going to take a little time to get used to. So I worked with the Sakai. This is the first time I worked with Canvas. I tested it out a little bit. It looks like it's fairly straightforward. You click on the student and you go into the homework and you pull their PDF file and you look through it. And whatever you see that's wrong, you just write it in a box that's in that homework place where the students submit the homework.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And of course, you should just reach out when there's something.
Okay.
Okay.
So should I finish all the homework grading by 3 days or a week, or what's the deadline for that?
No, you should try to get it done in 3 days, because the students that will need to hand it in again, it's going to come together with the next homework.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Yeah.